Have you ever thought about why certain people seem to be surrounded by drama? It's as if they carry a magnet that attracts emotional vampires, manipulators, and all kinds of poisonous people. While others go through the same world, pass through the same streets, and cohabit in the same situations, yet are nearly invisible to these predators. Have you ever glanced around, worn and exhausted from emotional wear, and wondered, why does this always happen to me? Why have these people chosen me as their target? If you're watching this video, you're probably tired of feeling exhausted, manipulated, or at the whim of people's psychological games which appear to feed off your energy. Perhaps you are someone who always strives to keep the peace, gives too much of yourself, avoids fights, but finds yourself locked in the same destructive relationship cycles. It's possible that deep down you've begun to believe that the problem is completely yours. Because I want you to listen to me until the end. Because what we're about to discuss here has the potential to turn a key inside you. Carl Jung, the pioneer of analytical psychology, uncovered something most people can't imagine. It isn't only about luck, fate, or poor fortune. There is a deep, almost invisible system that determines who toxic people seek and who they ignore. And it isn't because they are stronger, harder, or know how to impose themselves by shouting and fighting. It's something much quieter, and precisely for that reason much more powerful. Toxic people behave like emotional predators. They smell out any emotional wounds you may still be carrying within yourself. They are specialists at recognizing vulnerabilities, insecurities, and worries that people frequently try to conceal. And this is what makes you visible to them. The key to becoming psychologically inaccessible is not to battle against these people. It does not involve yelling, severing relationships, or erecting massive barriers around you. The real secret is something Jung dubbed integrating your shadow. Today I'd like to speak directly to you if you're tired of feeling exhausted, carrying weight that isn't yours, and living on the defensive. I want to show you that there is a way out. However, this is not what most people teach out there. It's not enough to learn catchy phrases, self-affirmation techniques, or create lists of boundaries. You need to go far deeper. You must understand and accept the darkest aspects of yourself, even if you are embarrassed to admit they exist. According to Jung, anything that bothers us about others might help us understand ourselves. And it is this realization that transforms everything. Because once you stop projecting your shadows onto others, toxic people will no longer regard you as a target. It's as if you're invisible to them. Not because you're hiding, but because you've closed the emotional gaps that allow them in. So stick with me till the end of the video. Today, I'll show you how to master this secret. It's not merely to keep harmful individuals away from you, but to finally be free. Free to engage in healthy relationships. Free to walk around the world without fear. You are free to be yourself without having to carry unseen chains. Because the secret was to never resist poison. The secret has always been to overcome the desire to be noticed or validated by those who exist in the shadows. Ready, let us go deep into this realm where few dare to walk. Carl Jung, in all his genius, spent a significant portion of his life too, researching the invisible forces that regulate the human psyche. One of his most significant findings was that unconscious tendencies, which are frequently rooted in early experiences and unresolved emotional concerns, can materialize as damaging actions in ourselves and others, even if they appear socially acceptable or are not openly hostile. However, toxic people do not arise out of nowhere, nor do they select their victims at random. They have an almost primal instinct for sniffing out what is injured within us, because it resonates with the shadow and complexes that exist. They can tell without using words where you are weak, where you are hiding fear, humiliation, or unfulfilled needs. If you find yourself frequently caught up in dramas, manipulative circumstances, or relationships, where you feel like you have to justify your worth or defend your sanity, know that this is not because you are flawed. It happens because, without realizing it, you are sending subtle messages. Signals that tell the world that something in me is still open, that still hurts. Jung termed this projections. Everything you do not accept about yourself, everything you suppress, evolves into a type of energy that leaks into the world. Toxic people act like predators, smelling emotional blood. They target those who are hurt because it allows them to exercise power, control, and feed off the drama that consumes you from within. But Jung found something even more amazing. When you integrate the pieces of yourself that you've been attempting to hide your shadow, You achieve what he refers to as psychic integrity, and psychological integrity is nearly palpable. It is similar to a vibrational frequency that repels those who exploit emotional gaps. Toxic people just lose interest in those who do not respond to their game, who do not display fear, and who do not want praise or affirmation. People with psychic integrity do not wage war on others. They are not always armed, anxious, and ready for the next attack. They live with internal solidity. They understand who they are. They know exactly what they want. And most crucially, they understand what they will not tolerate. Those who feed on chaos unconsciously see this stability. It's as if emotional predators start to regard these people as hard, smooth stones with nowhere to hide their claws. Jung believed that the shadow is a living aspect of the personality. Denying it does not make it go. It simply creates weakness. But when you integrate and embrace it, it transforms into strength. It begins to act in your favor, producing an energy field that repels those who would abuse your insecurities. Perhaps you're wondering, but how do I do this? How do I integrate something I'm not even aware exists? Here's where the real work starts, because psychic integrity cannot be gained with motivating slogans or reading a half-dozen self-help books. It is a profound, often painful, but ultimately liberating journey. In the following section, I will take you exactly into this zone. We will understand how to recognize the projections you make onto others and discover why what irritates or fascinates you most about toxic people is almost always a mirror of your own unhealed wounds. Are you ready to take the first step? Then let's proceed. If this content makes sense to you, click the subscribe button to follow the channel. Thank you for your support. We have now arrived at a point where nearly no one wants to go. Gazing inside, because it is much easier to blame the outside world, point fingers at toxic people, and label them as narcissists, emotional vampires, or manipulators. All of this may be true, but if it were only that, it would be sufficient to discontinue contact with these individuals. We'd be saved. However, reality is not so straightforward. You may have noticed that even when changing situations, careers, or even cities, the pattern frequently repeats itself. You leave one abusive relationship and enter into another comparable one. You escape one tyrannical boss and wind up meeting another. You distance yourself from a manipulative buddy, and then someone similar enters your life. Why is this happening? Carl Jung provides a severe yet liberating solution. What bothers or fascinates us strongly in others is frequently a reflection of what we deny or suppress about ourselves. This is what he called projection. Projection is the process of sticking pieces of yourself that you can't bear to see or admit to another person's image. Suddenly, that nasty person represents everything you despise or secretly crave, but are frightened to express. Think of someone who makes you angry, disgusted, or even fascinated. Ask yourself, what specifically disturbs or fascinates me about this person? Maybe you despise their selfishness, authoritarianism, or manipulativeness. However, if you go further, you may discover that there is a part of you that wants to set boundaries, has a desire for authority, and wants to be heard without having to ask permission. Perhaps this part of you was suppressed as a youngster when you were told that being angry was wrong, that desiring attention was ugly, and that speaking up was hazardous. So you learned to suppress such urges. And every time you meet someone who lives in that shadow without guilt, an explosive reaction occurs: hatred, rejection, or even an incredible attraction. Jung believed that only by changing the individual's attitude would the nation's psychology begin to change. He means that if you don't look inward, if you don't figure out which of your wounds are open, you'll keep sending signals to the world that say, here is pain, here is insecurity, here is fear. Toxic individuals can smell it. They approach exactly where they perceive vulnerability. Recognizing your projections is not easy. It is tough to realize that what makes you a victim is frequently linked to something within you. However, your power lies precisely at this point. When you ask yourself brutally, what is this person reflecting in me? You begin to gather the energy that has been dispersed over the planet. You stop wasting strength attempting to alter others and instead channel it into self-awareness. It is not about blaming yourself for the actions of toxic people, far from it, but about accepting that you have no control over who the world puts in your path. However, you have power over what you release into the world. When you stop projecting, you become an inhospitable target for emotional predators. They just no longer see a way to feed off of you. However, there is another key step. Learning not to contribute to toxic people's games. Are you ready to delve even deeper? Then continue with me. Now that you've begun to comprehend the projections you hold within yourself, we need to discuss something equally important: the drama, because acknowledging your own shadows is the first step. However, if you continue to feed the emotional game of toxic people, nothing will change. And perhaps this is one of the most difficult facts to accept. Sometimes we unknowingly offer the nourishment that these mental predators seek. Toxic individuals require something to survive, and it isn't simply your attention. They require your emotional energy. They thrive on your fear, wrath, insecurity, and resentment. Every outburst you have, every attempt to persuade them that they are incorrect, every impassioned speech or desperate cry of this is delicious nourishment for people who feed on turmoil. It's as if there's a dance. They provoke, and you react. They send forth modest emotional beta criticism, an irony, a punitive silence, or a veiled accusation and wait. When you bite the bait and lose control, they win. Because at that point, it makes no difference who is right or wrong. The focus turns to your emotional response. You become the problem. You become wild, exaggerated, and overly sensitive. Worse, you're left feeling guilty, drained, and ashamed, while they walk away undamaged, typically playing the victim. How many times have you tried explaining something rationally to someone who clearly does not want to understand? How many times have you attempted to debate, explain your case, or present evidence in the hope that the other will finally open their eyes? So what happened? Nothing. Or worse, you left the conversation even more perplexed, thinking whether you are exaggerating. This is no coincidence. Toxic people have an inherent ability to manipulate your perspective of reality. They understand that if they can knock you off balance and put you in an emotional state, they have already won half the war. Jung reminds us that everything we oppose persists. When you react strongly, you are essentially providing greater force to what you want to combat. You're saying this has a deep impact on me? Toxic people use this information against you. They chart your mental vulnerabilities, study your triggers, and then keep you imprisoned in a web that appears impossible to escape. So what is the antidote? Neutrality. And don't mistake neutrality for weakness or passivity. Being neutral does not mean absorbing everything meekly or becoming a doormat. It is, in truth, a powerful demonstration of power. When you reply to provocations with calm, deliberate silence, or simply refuse to participate in the game, you fully deflate the other person's emotional balloon. You remove the food from the hungry monster. Toxic people can't stand those who don't respond. They immediately lose interest once they see they can't destabilize you. And eventually they begin to avoid you since your presence serves as a continual reminder that they have no control over you. To get there, you must first learn how to manage your reactions. This is not easy, especially when we have past wounds that arise in response to specific behaviors. That is why, in addition to detecting your projections and putting an end to the drama, there is another critical component in shadow integration: the creation of your internal limits. Boundaries are not only exterior obstacles, they begin within you. They determine whether or not you accept something emotionally. They protect you from emotional blackmail and subtle manipulation. And that is what we shall discuss in the next section. Many people believe that setting boundaries just entails learning to say no to others. But I will tell you a truth that no one shares. External boundaries are useless if you don't have internal boundaries. The genuine defense against poisonous individuals begins with you. Toxic people not only disrupt your schedule, physical space, and time, they also disrupt your thoughts. And they do this because they see open doors. These doors represent your unmet needs: the need to be accepted, the need to please, the need to prove you are correct, the need to avoid conflict at all costs, and the need to be perceived as a decent person. As long as these needs are screaming inside you, anyone can use them as levers to manipulate you. Carl Jung explains why this happens. He clarified, "The shadow is a living part of the personality. As long as you do not integrate your shadow, it will rule you from the unconscious. And do you know what? One of the most powerful shadows we carry is the belief that we must be loved by everyone. that we need to be perceived as correct, fair, nice, and polite. And underlying it comes a fundamental fear: rejection, abandonment, and being alone. Toxic individuals smell fear in the same way that sharks smell blood. They understand that simply threatening to withhold affection, respect, or acceptance is enough to keep you stuck in their game. Sometimes they do not say anything directly. They simply shift their tone of speech, turn away, fall silent, and create a tense feeling in the air. You soon find yourself attempting to resolve the matter. Please apologize and over-explain, and they reclaim control over you. Internal limits entail knowing deep down that you do not require anyone's permission to exist. They imply being quite clear about who you are, what you want, and what you will not allow. And, most crucially, they imply that you are willing to sacrifice relationships, opportunities, or even the goodwill of others in order to be loyal to yourself. This does not imply that you must live armed, distrustful, or alone. On the contrary, when you have internal boundaries, you may live more freely since you are no longer afraid of losing the acceptance of others. You know that whatever occurs, you will be satisfied with yourself. And this energy of steadiness is evident to everyone, including toxic people who just lose interest, since there are no more hooks to cling on to. Internal limits can keep you from getting caught up in other people's emotional games. When someone attempts to provoke, manipulate, or test your weaknesses, you may watch the game without being emotionally involved. You see the maneuver, but do not feel forced to respond. You maintain your composure, because you understand that that person's opinion or mood does not define you. But here's the hard truth. Creating internal limits demands guts, takes confronting the parts of yourself that still feel small, needy, and longing for acceptance. Entails confronting the fear of loneliness, judgment, and being perceived as selfish or cold. Only those who are willing to explore this region will obtain true freedom. It's a process. Nobody wakes up with impenetrable limits. However, every time you choose to be true to yourself, even if others remove themselves or condemn you, you reinforce those limits. Every time you do this, your energy shifts. You begin to send signs of psychic integrity. As previously said, toxic people are quickly aware of this and choose to seek out another target. But there is still a critical stage in this journey, possibly the most profound and transforming of all. Because acknowledging your projections, ceasing to feed the drama, and establishing internal limits are insufficient. You must have the guts to confront the worst part of yourself. Now we reach the darkest, and ironically most liberating part of this journey, accepting your own darkness. Because we've already discussed projections, emotions, and internal boundaries. All of this is vital. However, there is something at the heart of all vulnerability that draws toxic people. A resistance to embrace the deepest aspects of our own psyche. Carl Jung once stated, "To know your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of others." And it's more than just a nice sentence. This is a powerful statement. Because everything you conceal, everything you pretend, does not exist. And everything you feel ugly, humiliating, or unpleasant about yourself becomes a weapon that can and will be used against you. Let us be honest. We all have bad ideas. We all experience envy, wrath, and wounded pride. We've all felt the temptation to injure, manipulate, deceive, or exact retribution. But most of us bury these bits deep below, believing that if no one knows, they don't exist. But they do. And they continue to exist, throbbing in the depths of the psyche, looking for ways to express. The difficulty is that the more you hide your shadow, the bigger it becomes in the dark. Even worse, the more vulnerable you become to people who can notice your flaws. Toxic people have a radar that detects where you are terrified. If you go to great lengths to appear good, correct, and perfect, they will automatically probe at the wounds that tell you that you are not so perfect after all. Then you lose control, react, try to prove the opposite, and fall back into the drama cycle. Integrating the darkness does not imply being a cruel, cold, or selfish individual. It entails acknowledging that all of these aspects exist within you and learning to relate to them mindfully. It implies understanding that, while you can feel angry, you do not have to act on it. Yes, you can have negative ideas, but they do not determine who you are. When you realize that you have the ability to be cruel, you can become truly compassionate. because you choose to be so. When you realize your own envy, you may stop letting it to harm you. When you recognize that there is a part of you that wishes for power or control, you will be able to avoid falling victim to those who seek to dominate you. This technique is not easy. It often hurts since it requires removing the masks you've developed over the years in order to be accepted, loved, and admired. It entails looking at impulses that you may regard as terrible. But Jung understood that the greatest risk is not in the shadow itself. It is in disregarding it, because everything that remains unconscious propels your life and you begin to call it fate. When you incorporate your shadow, something remarkable occurs. You feel lighter. You no longer fear other people's judgment, because nothing they say about you can have a lasting impact on you. You're already aware of your own demons, and this provides a psychic freedom that poisonous people cannot tolerate. They thrive on your fear, shame, and desire to disguise who you are. When they understand you have nothing to hide, they lose all interest. Carl Jung left behind an enormous legacy. He realized something that modern psychology is still struggling to grasp today. You can't control the harmful individuals around you. You cannot stop them from existing. You cannot stop the world from having people who thrive on chaos, manipulation, or the agony of others. But there is something you can do, and it is far more powerful. You can become someone who these people instinctively avoid. When you integrate your shadow, stop projecting your unhealed wounds, establish internal boundaries, and learn not to fuel the drama, you start to originate a whole different energy. It is as if you become psychologically invisible to people looking for flaws. You begin to exist on another level of reality, one without emotional breaches through which toxic people can enter. They understand they have nothing to grasp onto, no way to irritate or control you, so they simply walk away. But the shift does not end there. Integrating the shadow involves more than just avoiding harmful people. It's about allowing oneself to live truthfully. It is recognizing that you do not require anyone's approval to exist. It is experiencing inner serenity regardless of who praises or criticizes you. Living without fear of your own dark side because you know it exists, but you also know that you don't have to be governed. People who integrate their shadow are attracted to other healthy, balanced, and mature people. Your relationships change. Your professional environment changes. Your energy changes. You no longer feel tired after social engagements. You no longer feel fatigued from attempting to wear masks or control how people view you. You'll begin to attract people who share your values of truth, respect, and depth. Jung said, "That which you resist persists." As long as you fight against your own darkness, you'll continue to find ways to manifest and to attract people who will force you to see it, right? But the moment you decide to integrate that part of yourself, your whole life begins to reorganize. You free yourself from fear. Free yourself of guilt. You begin to feel something few others understand. A sense of completeness. If this video resonated with something in you, if at any moment you thought this is what I need, then I want to make you an invitation. In the comments, please share which point had the greatest influence on you. Whatever it was, note it down. Putting it into words is also a form of integration. It brings the unconscious into consciousness. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, do so immediately. Continue this journey. The next video is equally crucial as this one. See you there?